I'd like to open today's video with a Chinese joke. I'd like to, but there's like a billion of them, and they're all pretty much the same. If you've watched the sweet baby mama drama surrounding 4 Woken, Suicide Squad, Kill the Franchise, and a Concorde disaster to rival Flight 4590, you know the commie consultants in the video game industry have been on a losing streak so tedious, so torturous, they've already been named honorary Arizona Cardinals. But as with all whiplash effects, it's rarely enough to merely excoriate awful games utterly beshitted by Bolshevism. The hive mind must also elect an alternative, something not necessarily based, and certainly not an explicitly conservative game, but positioned at least contrary-wise enough to provide a commercial counterpoint to the SJW dross occupying the aisle opposite. In the past, many games, from Witcher 3 to Hogwarts Legacy, have all but bathed in counterculture cash, only for it to later emerge that the developers who benefited from said anti-woke windfall were in fact danger-haired dogshit merchants in their own rights. The latest game to benefit from this phenomenon, African-American myth, Wukong. Today's video isn't about the quality of said game. If you enjoy the Chinese chimp fest in question, more power to you. But the curious case of Black Myth Wukong being the latest front in the culture war is worse by an order of magnitude than the lesser betrayals by the developers of Witcher, Hogwarts Legacy, or whatever the heckin' hell it happens to be this week. Because Black Myth Wukong is funded and at least in large part owned by the Chinese Communist Party, and the CCP is the primary funder of wokeness in the West, and no other country in the world comes within 500 miles of matching them. In 2022, the Soros Economic Development Fund, whose ESG spending dwarfs most governments in the West or East, yes, even the Middle East, fellow noticers, committed over 100 million British pounds or 130 million US dollars to pushing ESG, DEI, and all-around wokeness in the West. By the ass end of 2023, annual Chinese funding of ESG, bridge, and DEI initiatives in the Americas totaled an estimated $4.5 trillion, or roughly 1/3 what Tim Pool spends on gray shirts and Billabong beanies. And I can already hear the rejoinder, but Razör, for all their Fidel Filatin faults, China are a titan of traditional morality, criminalizing all but the most benign of degenerate behavior under penalty of imprisonment. Right. Unless, of course, you count traditional Chinese morality, which they've stricken from the history books and replaced with commie claptrap under penalty of same. Look, at the hustle were any more elementary, Dr. Disrespect wouldn't be allowed within 100 yards of it. And it goes a little something like this. All but ban ESG in all its multifarious manifestations at home, while exporting it everywhere the hell else. Not at all unlike China shutting down domestic flights during COVID while keeping them in the air everywhere else. What hurts my enemy helps me. And I discussed this in detail in my Hollywood Was Always Red rant several years back, but China's predecessors, the Ruskies, understood this sensationally well, funding domestic anarcho-commies in the United States to the tune of millions from the foundation of the Bolsheviks in the early 20th century, right up until Perestroika sank the Soviet Union. And with the cratering of the Comintern, the Chi-Coms supervened their authority. There's a reason the CCP studies the Soviet collapse like a piece of Dead Sea parchment. More to the point, I'd hasten to remind you all that everyone's favorite pinko punching bag, Sweet Baby Inc., is a Canadian consulting firm. If you backtrack through the knotwork of nozzleheads who fund this propagandistic pablum, you'll eventually land upon Infinite Ammo Inc., a company founded by Alec Holovka, the dude who done deleted himself after Zoe Quinn claimed he kicked the crap out of her when they were engaging in pale, doughy intercourse. Infinite Ammo, like many Canadian developers, received kickbacks from the Kanuckistani government to keep production deep in the heart of Caribou country. And if you aren't apprised of Canada's vassal-overlord relationship with the CCP, well...
Everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper. That's not appropriate. And that's not how the way the conversation was conducted.
如果有诚心，咱们就用一个互相尊重的态度来进行很好的沟通。
If there is
否则这个结果就不好说了。
if
In
there is
Canada, we
sincerity
believe
on
in
your part,
free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have. We will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on, and we will have
有
to
些可以
continue.
建设性，但是
创造条件，创造条件。
Let's create the conditions first.
好，好。
But even if you find those oblique connections unpersuasive, the raw, ridiculous data should do the job just fine. Tencent, the infamous online gaming and investment conglomerate with commie paw prints all over its investment portfolio, completely owns Conan Exiles developers Funcom, League of Legends douche canoes Riot Games, and the titwanks at Techland, while they boast partial or even majority ownership of everyone from Paradox to Epic, Bloober Team to Ubisoft to FromSoft. Hell, they even partially own the damn Discord app you use to call halfwits the hard R. Fortunately, they're hardly connected to the Chinese Communist Party at all. Unless, of course, you count the 275 separate party branches located in our corporate offices, including 11 members of the executive board, 3 members of the Disciplinary Inspection Commission, 722 part-time and 10 full-time Chinese Communist Party officials, all employed on site. Other than that, they've never even heard of Chinese communism. And those are the lowball estimates. In 2020, the Epic Times published a list of a known 7,723 party members or officials operating within Tencent across each of its myriad branches. And this was only one Chinese company. Trying to run an independent private business in a Maoist dictatorship ends about as well as playing leapfrog with a unicorn, which explains why a private Chinese business is equally as imaginary. But through it all, the theorem is stupidly simple. Export the same socio-political slop to your Western rivals in industries you're desirous to subsume that you brutally ban back in Beijing. And this through line tracks to more material matters as well. The fentanyl crisis gets more press than P. Diddley these days, and as with almost anything else in the Sol system, what doesn't get anywhere near as much play is the source of said crisis, namely that the rolling fields of fentanyl were first planted by Chinese commies. Look, China's almost as communist as Reddit's moderators, and incidentally, the CCP boasts partial ownership in Reddit in case you are curious. Point being, communist countries don't have private companies. To do business with Xi Jinping, you must first French kiss his Xi Jinping, a fact Trump was evidently aware of as his sanctions against the socialist supergiant impelled the CCP to add fentanyl to a list of controlled substances in 2019. And if you're wondering why we went from Shicon smuggling in fentanyl directly off the boat from Beijing to the Sinaloa cartel smuggling so-called precursor chemicals across the Mexican border in record numbers, take a bow, bitch! You cracked the easiest code since Contra. The result? The ugliest numbers this side of Jim Sterling's bathroom scale. In 2024 alone, DHS has apprehended 35 million fentanyl pills, or as Kurt Angle calls it, a slow weekend. And folks, those numbers are only up to August. The year ain't even 3/4 over yet. In 2022, less than 2,000 Chinese illegal aliens were apprehended on their way to Arizona from Mexico, which is at least twice as big as a Kamala rally without a rap concert. In 2023, that number fifth-tupled from 2,000 to 23,500 Chinese illegal aliens just inexplicably ambling around the Arizona desert in under 1 year. And if that sounds dangerous, just imagine if they'd been driving.
平頭係，看睇哦係。
A recent report from the House Committee on Strategic Competition found the CCP directly funded the companies pinching out those precursor chemicals, which they then export for the formulation of fentanyl. In 2023, 75,000 Americans fentanyl shuffled off this mortal coil. In this year alone, a Chinese drug lord was busted for shipping over 2 tons of pinko pills into the U.S., while a money laundering outfit funding the Sinaloa cartel was also righteously shit-hammered. The location of said laundering operation? Say it now in your best Trump voice. China. China. White House advisor Jake Sullivan, you know, one of the people actually running the country while President Poopy Pants plays with his Duplo blocks, met with the Chinese all of 1 month ago, after which he assured us all China's unerringly committed to cracking down on crack. And in a paroxysm of cosmic irony, all of this occurred the same week Biden announced the observation of Overdose Awareness Month. Don't worry, Slow Mojo. Every time I watch the absolute State of the Union and see you geek to the gills on angel dust and pixie sticks, screaming at strangers and challenging long-dead relatives to a push-up contest, I am keenly aware of the dangers of an overdose, I assure you. If you're wondering how soap opera seriously the Sino-socialists take the Chester-in-Chief since pressuring the Chinese to crack down on fentanyl in the past 2 years, the CCP has responded with, drumroll please, 1 entire drug arrest, who I'll pretend for my own amusement's sake was named Doping. Look, whenever I point out the Chinese origin of ESG funding, I either get called a tinfoil hat-slinging conspiratard or criticized with equal acrimony for espousing what they construe as the incorrect conspiracy. But this is big boy world, gang, and you need to ask yourself a big boy question. Is it less disruptive, cost-efficient, and uncomplicated to send a roving retinue of trained cyber assassins to karate chop Chinese rivals? Or is it easier to fund debauched bullshit, ruinous narcotics, and jag-off gender ideology to ensure that before an American child reaches his preteen years, he's already had more identities than Mick Foley? Spy movies are hot shit and all, but don't confuse a conniving cabal of ignominious assholes engineering our downfall through subtle subversion and foreign slush funds with the James Bondian cartoon of cackling Asiatic assassins, or as I like to call them, Chinese takeout. I'm Razorfist, go to speeder! Guy walks into a Chinese bar. He points to a bottle and asks, "Is it whiskey?" Bartender replies, "No, it's safe."